The cowboy was looking for a maid. The Apache woman said, "I came to be your wife." Everything changed. The cowboy had spent most of his life riding across the wide open plains. He knew every hill, every stream, and every hidden trail that ran through the land he now called his own. After years of drifting from town to town, helping with cattle drives and taking odd jobs wherever work could be found, he finally settled on a small ranch on the outskirts of a growing frontier settlement. It was not a large ranch, but it was enough to make him feel grounded, to give him a place he could call home. The ranch had rolling fields, a modest wooden house, and a barn that had seen better days, but he was proud of it. He had built this place from nothing, using his hands, sweat, and every bit of experience he had gathered on the trail. But owning land also meant responsibility, and responsibility came with work. Endless work. From the early hours of dawn, when the sky was still dark and the air smelled of cold earth, he rose to tend to the livestock. Cows needed feeding, fences needed mending, and the barn had to be swept and cleaned. Then there were the fields, which required constant care to ensure they would provide enough hay and crops for the coming seasons. On some days, the work felt heavier than the weight of the saddle he had carried for years, and as much as he loved the freedom of the plains, he began to realize that one person could not do it all. He had grown used to solitude. Many cowboys preferred it. It allowed them to think, to ride long hours without conversation, to feel the wind on their face and the rhythm of their horse beneath them. But now, settled on a ranch, he realized there were tasks that required more than just his hands. Cooking meals, cleaning the house, managing supplies. These were all duties he could manage, but with great effort. He had a strong sense of pride, but he also knew that pride would not keep the barn from falling apart or the dinner table from being empty. He needed help. One afternoon, as the sun began to lower itself toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, he made a decision. He would find someone to help around the house. Not because he could not do it himself, but because he wanted a life where work did not consume every moment. Someone who could help with cooking and cleaning, someone he could trust, someone who could make the house feel less empty. He thought of placing an ad in the local town's bulletin board, or perhaps speaking to the townsfolk directly. It was not common to seek help in such a way, but he had learned that honesty and effort often brought results. The next morning, he rode into the nearest town. It was a dusty settlement with a handful of stores, a blacksmith, a small school, and a general store that sold everything from flour to boots. People greeted him with polite nods, recognizing him as a man who had recently claimed a stretch of land outside the town. He approached the bulletin board and carefully pinned a note, "Rancher seeking house help." Duties include cooking, cleaning, and general household work.
Honest and capable person wanted.
Inquire at the ranch. He read the note twice, ensuring it sounded polite yet clear. Then he stepped back and watched the sun glint off the metal roofs of the town. As he rode back to his ranch, he felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. He had never asked for help before. He had always relied on himself. But he also knew that sometimes reaching out was necessary, even for someone as independent as he was. Days passed, and while he continued his chores, he kept an eye on the road leading to his ranch. Occasionally, travelers passed by, waving as they went, but no one stopped. He began to wonder if anyone would even respond to his note. The ranch, though his pride and joy, felt quieter than usual, almost too quiet. Each evening, after the work of the day was done, he would sit on the porch, watching the sky turn from gold to deep indigo, and listen to the soft calls of distant animals. He imagined the house with the warmth of someone else inside, the smell of food cooking, the soft murmur of conversation, and it made him realize just how lonely it could be, even when surrounded by wide-open land. One morning, just as he was finishing the stable chores, a figure appeared on the horizon. At first, he thought it might be another traveler, perhaps someone lost or seeking directions, but as the figure came closer, he could see it was a woman. Her steps were steady, purposeful. She carried no luggage, only a small bundle tied with cloth. She approached the ranch confidently, and the cowboy felt a strange sense of curiosity mixed with caution. When she reached the porch, she stopped and looked directly at him. Her eyes were steady and calm. yet there was a spark of determination in them. She spoke with a clear voice. "I heard you were looking for help around the house. I came to help." The cowboy blinked. Her offer seemed simple, but there was an unusual confidence in the way she said it. He had expected someone timid or hesitant, someone who might wait to be asked to work, but this woman seemed sure of herself. "You help around the house?" he asked, trying to match his words with the thought that ran through his mind. She nodded. "Yes."
I can cook, clean, and help with what you need. I am capable.
There was a pause as he studied her. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Her clothing was simple but well made, suited for work rather than display. Her hair was dark and worn in a braid down her back, and her eyes held stories he could not yet understand. Something about her presence made the air feel different, as if the ranch itself had shifted to welcome her arrival. He nodded slowly, feeling both relieved and intrigued. "All right," he said. "We can try it. The work here is hard, but if you are willing, we can start tomorrow."
She smiled faintly.
"I am willing." The next day the ranch began to feel less empty. She moved through the rooms with ease, sweeping and dusting, preparing simple meals with care. The cowboy watched her, impressed by her efficiency and quiet strength. Tasks that had taken him hours alone now seemed manageable, and the house began to feel alive in a way it hadn't in months. The walls seemed warmer, the air softer. For the first time, he noticed how much he had missed companionship, even the silent kind that came from sharing a space with someone who cared about the place as much as he did. As the sun set that evening, he found himself sitting on the porch again, but this time she joined him. They did not speak much at first, but her presence was comforting. He realized that help was not just about chores, it was about connection, about the small moments that made life richer. He began to understand that his search for a maid might have led him to something far more meaningful, though he did not yet know it. The cowboy, who had spent so many years on his own, had taken the first step toward a life that could be shared. And the woman, confident and purposeful, had found a place where her skills and spirit were valued. The ranch, once quiet and empty, began to hum with the possibility of change. Little did he know that change was only the beginning of a story neither of them could have predicted. The next morning, the cowboy woke before sunrise as usual. The cold air bit at his face as he stepped outside, and he could see the faint glow of the horizon turning from deep blue to soft gold. He had grown used to starting the day early, but today felt different. There was a new rhythm to the ranch, a sense that the day might hold something unexpected. Inside the house, the woman was already moving. He watched from the doorway as she carried water from the well, poured it into a basin, and began preparing breakfast. Her movements were deliberate yet graceful, and the cowboy found himself quietly admiring the way she worked. There was no hurry in her steps, no wasted motion. Everything she did seemed efficient and purposeful. For someone he had just met, she brought a strange calm to the space, as if she had always belonged there. He stepped inside, careful not to disturb her rhythm. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough from years of wind and dust. "Good morning," she replied, glancing up with a small smile. There was no hesitation in her voice, no doubt about who she was or what she had come to do. That confidence intrigued him. Most people in town would have been shy, unsure of themselves, or hesitant to speak plainly. But she was not like anyone he had ever met. They shared breakfast in silence at first, each lost in their own thoughts. The cowboy thought about the work that lay ahead, feeding the animals, mending fences, checking the fields. It had always been a solitary life, and he was used to working alone. Now, having someone else there changed everything. There was a new sense of possibility, and even a strange comfort in knowing he would not have to do it all by himself. After breakfast, they moved outside. The cowboy handed her a bucket and showed her how to feed the chickens and gather eggs. She watched carefully, learning quickly, asking questions when necessary, but mostly observing and adapting. She had a natural skill for the work, and the cowboy was impressed. It was rare to find someone who could step into the routines of a ranch and handle them with such ease. As the day wore on, they worked side by side. The cowboy noticed the way she spoke to the animals, softly and respectfully, and he realized she had a deep understanding of the land and its creatures. It reminded him of the times he had spent with other ranchers, learning the ways of the plains. But there was something different about her approach, a gentleness combined with strength that he had rarely seen. By midday, the sun was high in the sky, and the air was warm against their skin. They paused to rest under the shade of a large oak tree near the barn. The cowboy drank from his canteen, while she sipped water from a small metal cup. For a long moment they simply watched the fields, the animals moving about, and the soft sway of the grass in the breeze. "You work hard," he said, finally breaking the silence. She smiled a quiet, knowing smile. "I know work," she replied, "and I do not mind it. There is pride in work done well." Her words struck him in a way he did not expect. He had spent so many years alone that he had forgotten how much it mattered to have someone who not only worked alongside him but understood the value of effort. He felt a sense of relief, as if a weight he had carried for years was suddenly lighter. As the afternoon approached, the cowboy taught her how to mend a fence. The sun was warm on their backs, and the sound of the hammer against the wood echoed across the fields. She listened carefully, asking questions and following his instructions with precision. Occasionally she would offer a suggestion or an observation, and he found himself surprised by her insight. She saw things he had missed, small details that made the work easier or more effective. By the time they finished, the sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the ranch. They both paused to look at their work. The fence was solid, straight, and secure. The cowboy nodded in approval, and for the first time in a long time he felt a quiet satisfaction in completing the day's tasks, not alone, but with someone who shared the responsibility and cared about the result. As evening approached, they returned to the house. She began preparing dinner while he tended to the animals one last time. The smell of cooking filled the air, warm and inviting. He realized how much the house had changed in just one day. It no longer felt empty or silent. There was a sense of life, of presence, that had been missing for years. They ate together in the small dining area, sharing simple food but enjoying the company. Conversation came slowly at first, awkwardly, but it grew more comfortable with each passing moment. He asked about her past, about where she had come from, and what had brought her to this place. She spoke carefully, choosing her words, but he could see the depth of her experiences in her eyes. There was a strength there, a resilience born of life's challenges, and he found himself drawn to it. After dinner they sat on the porch again, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the cowboy felt a strange sense of peace. He had spent so many evenings alone, staring at the same sky, thinking only of work and survival. Now, he could share it with someone else. "You have changed this place," he said quietly. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "It is not just me," she replied. "You made room for it to change." I only followed. Her words made him pause. He realized that the change was mutual. She had brought new energy, new life, but he had also allowed it to happen. For the first time, he understood that life could be different, that companionship and work could exist together in harmony. That night, as they settled into their separate spaces within the house, the cowboy lay awake for a while, thinking about the day. The ranch felt different now, not just because of the work accomplished, but because of her presence. He realized that he had underestimated the power of connection, of having someone to share both the burdens and the simple moments of life. Over the next few days, their routine settled into a rhythm. She continued to work around the house, learning more about the ranch and helping with small tasks outside. They shared meals, conversations, and quiet moments on the porch. The cowboy found himself opening up in ways he had not in years, sharing stories of his past, the trails he had ridden, and the challenges he had faced. She listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply absorbing the stories in thoughtful silence. One afternoon, while checking the fields together, he noticed something remarkable. She had a way of observing the land, noticing patterns in the soil, the grass, and the animals. She suggested small improvements that made his work easier and more efficient. He realized that her skills went beyond household tasks. She brought knowledge, insight, and a perspective he had never considered. It became clear to him that she was not just a helper. She was a partner in every sense of the word, though neither of them had spoken the words aloud yet. The trust was there, built slowly through shared work, quiet understanding, and the simple act of being present for each other. By the end of the week, the cowboy could no longer imagine the ranch without her. The loneliness that had filled his days for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of companionship and shared purpose. He had sought help, expecting a maid, and found something far more significant, a connection that promised to change the course of his life. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, the cowboy realized that the unexpected visitor had brought more than her skills and strength. She had brought a new way of seeing the world, a sense of hope and possibility he had not felt in years. And for the first time he understood that life on the ranch, and perhaps life itself, could be richer and more fulfilling when shared with someone who truly cared. The days that followed continued in this manner. Work was hard, yes, but it was easier with her presence. The house was cleaner, the meals were better, and the ranch began to feel alive in a way it had not before. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the cowboy realized that he had stopped thinking of her as just help. She had become a part of the life he had built, a part he did not want to lose. The woman, too, had begun to feel a sense of belonging. She had arrived at the ranch with a purpose, and now she found herself invested not just in the work, but in the people, the land, and the life they were building together. She had come to help, but she had also come to belong, and in doing so, she had changed the cowboy's life, in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Days turned into weeks on the ranch, and the cowboy began to notice the subtle changes in both the land and himself. The routine of daily chores, feeding the animals, checking fences, tending the crops, no longer felt like a lonely burden. With her presence, the work became easier and, unexpectedly, even enjoyable. He watched her move through the ranch with quiet confidence, knowing instinctively what needed to be done, and doing it with skill. She was strong and capable, yet gentle, treating the animals and land with a respect he had rarely seen. It was a sunny afternoon when they decided to tackle the orchard together. The small grove of apple and peach trees had been neglected for some time. Many branches were dry, and some trees leaned precariously under the weight of last season's fruit. The cowboy had often thought about pruning the trees and clearing the ground, but had postponed it, unsure if he could manage alone. Now, with her by his side, the task seemed possible. They worked in silence at first, focusing on their tasks. She climbed the low branches with ease, cutting away the dead wood, while he gathered the fallen branches and stacked them near the fence to burn later. At one point, she handed him a branch that had been too high for him to reach. Their fingers brushed briefly, and both paused for a moment, though neither spoke. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a sense that their partnership was growing into something deeper, something neither had expected. "You have a way with this land," the cowboy said, finally breaking the quiet. "I've been caring for it for years, but you see things I don't." She smiled, wiping sweat from her forehead.
I grew up close to the earth, she said. It teaches you if you listen.
Everything has a way of showing what it needs. Her words lingered in his mind. He realized that he had been so focused on survival, on keeping the ranch running, that he had forgotten to truly observe it, to understand its needs. She had brought a new perspective, a way of seeing that made him appreciate the land in a way he never had before. As they worked, a light breeze stirred the leaves, and the sound of the orchard, the rustling of branches, the occasional call of a bird, filled the air. For the first time in years, the cowboy felt at peace. He had always thought of peace as a quiet evening after a long day of work. But now he understood that true peace came from sharing life with someone who understood it, who cared not just about the land but about the life it supported. After hours of pruning and clearing, they stepped back to admire their work. The orchard looked renewed, the trees more stable, and the ground clear of debris. The cowboy felt a swell of pride, not only for the work they had accomplished but for the way they had done it together. He realized that the partnership they were forming was more than convenience. It was respect, trust, and the beginning of something far greater. As evening approached, the cowboy lit a small fire near the barn to prepare dinner. She helped him gather vegetables from the garden and clean the fish he had caught earlier that day. They worked side by side, speaking in short bursts, laughing quietly when mistakes happened, and sharing small victories. By the time the meal was ready, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the sky glowed with shades of orange and purple. They ate together under the open sky, the smell of smoke and fresh food mingling in the air. After dinner, they sat near the fire, the warmth comforting against the cool night. The cowboy noticed how her presence had begun to fill the spaces in his life that had felt empty for so long. He realized that he had underestimated the value of companionship, of having someone who shared not just the work but the simple joys of life. She had brought laughter, insight, and a sense of purpose that made each day feel richer. Over the next few days, the cowboy introduced her to other parts of the ranch he had managed alone for years. He showed her the water system, the hidden paths through the fields, and the habits of the livestock. She listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and offered suggestions that often made his work easier. He realized that she was not just learning, she was contributing in ways he had never anticipated. One morning as they worked in the fields, a group of townsfolk rode by on horseback. They paused at the fence to wave, some calling greetings. The cowboy noticed their curious glances at the woman working beside him. He knew that many in the town would find it unusual. A woman working so confidently on a ranch, not as a guest or visitor, but as a partner. Some might whisper, question her presence, or misunderstand her intentions. But he felt a quiet pride in having her by his side. She had proven herself capable, honest, and strong. "You seem calm around them," he said later, as they rested in the shade. "I've learned to let people think what they will," she replied. "The work and the truth of it matter more than their opinions." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that she had faced challenges in her life that he could barely imagine, yet she approached each day with resilience and grace. He admired her strength, her courage, and the way she held herself with dignity in the face of uncertainty. As the weeks passed, their routines became natural. They shared meals, chores, and quiet evenings. The house was always clean, the meals nourishing, and the ranch running more smoothly than it ever had. He began to notice small changes in himself. He laughed more, paused to enjoy the sunset, and found satisfaction not only in work done but in the shared effort that made it meaningful. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the barn roof together, he slipped slightly on a plank. She caught his arm, steadying him before he could fall. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment the world seemed to pause. There was trust in that single touch, a recognition that they relied on each other in ways beyond the work itself. Later, as they rested from the labor, she shared stories of her past, of her family, her upbringing, and the lessons she had learned from the land and people around her. He listened intently, realizing that her experiences had shaped her into the remarkable person she was today. She had faced hardships, yet she carried herself with strength and a quiet joy that was contagious. He felt grateful to have her in his life, not just as a helper, but as a person whose presence enriched every moment. The cowboy, who had once believed that life on the ranch was a solitary endeavor, now understood that it could be shared. The partnership they had formed went beyond chores and responsibilities. It was built on trust, respect, and a deepening connection that neither of them had anticipated. He began to see that the woman had changed not just the rhythm of his days, but the way he viewed life itself. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. The air was cool, and the faint sound of animals settling for the night filled the background. He turned to her and spoke quietly. "I never expected this. Having someone here, someone who cares about all of it, everything I do, it feels different. Better." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight.
"It does not have to be lonely," she said. "Life can be shared."
Work can be shared, joy and hardship both. Her words stayed with him long after that night. He realized that he had been searching for more than a helper. He had been searching for someone who could walk beside him, someone who could share in the responsibilities and the quiet moments alike. And now, he had found her. In the weeks that followed, they faced small challenges together, a broken fence, a sudden storm, or a sick animal. But each obstacle brought them closer. They learned to communicate without words, to anticipate each other's needs, and to rely on each other in ways that went beyond the physical tasks. The cowboy began to see that she had become indispensable not because of the work she did alone, but because of the way she complemented his efforts, filled the gaps, and brought insight where he had none. By the end of part 3, the cowboy and the woman had grown from simple partners in work to companions in life. They shared responsibilities, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. The ranch thrived not only because of their combined labor but because of the bond they were building. Their connection was more than practical. It was emotional, rooted in trust, respect, and a growing affection that neither could ignore. The cowboy realized that he had been searching for a maid, expecting help with chores, and had found something far greater: a companion, a partner, and perhaps, in time, someone who would change his life. Life on the ranch had settled into a steady rhythm, but the cowboy and the woman soon realized that the world outside their small homestead was not always as calm as it was within the fences and fields. The community nearby was small, and everyone knew each other, which often meant that unusual arrangements drew attention. The woman's presence on the ranch, confident and independent, began to attract curious, and sometimes suspicious, glances from the townsfolk. At first it was subtle. A neighbor might linger a little longer than usual when passing by, or pause at the fence to ask a question that felt more like scrutiny than conversation. Some of the men in town whispered to one another, shaking their heads when they thought the cowboy wasn't looking. Women who came to trade at the market would glance at the woman curiously, and sometimes there was a question in their tone, though they tried to keep it polite. The cowboy noticed it all but chose not to react. He had faced judgment before in other towns, and he understood that people often feared what they did not understand. Still, it was impossible to ignore. One afternoon, a group of men from town rode out to the ranch under the pretense of checking on the roads, but their eyes betrayed their true intent. They circled the fields, nodding at the livestock, and then stopped to speak to him. "You've got a lot of work done here," one man said, trying to sound friendly. "But I hear you've got company on the ranch." Not the usual kind. The cowboy straightened, meeting the man's gaze steadily. "She helps around the house. That's all you need to know." The man shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to respond. "Just making conversation," he muttered, before mounting his horse and leaving. The cowboy watched him go, feeling a mixture of relief and irritation. He didn't need the approval of others, but he knew the scrutiny would continue. Meanwhile, the woman noticed the tension as well. She had lived through times when outsiders questioned her choices or her presence, and she understood the importance of patience. "Let them think what they want," she told him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the fields. "It does not change the truth of this place or the work we do." Her words were steady, calming, and the cowboy found himself grateful. She had a way of seeing things clearly, cutting through worry and fear with simple, honest logic. He realized that her strength was not just in her work, but in her perspective. She gave him courage when he needed it most, and he began to rely on her not only for physical tasks but for guidance and support. The challenges were not only social. One morning, after several days of heavy rain, the creek near the ranch swelled and overflowed its banks. Water rushed across the fields, threatening the livestock and the crops. The cowboy and the woman sprang into action immediately. They worked side by side, moving animals to higher ground, securing fences, and patching weak spots where water had started to break through. It was grueling work, and by mid-afternoon they were soaked to the bone and exhausted. Yet, through the struggle, their bond grew stronger. Each time the cowboy reached for a tool, she anticipated what he would need. Each time she shouted instructions, he trusted her judgment completely. Together, they managed to save most of the animals and prevent serious damage to the property. By evening, as the storm passed and the sun peeked through the clouds, they stood in the field soaked and muddy but triumphant. "That was close," the cowboy said, breathing heavily. "Couldn't have done it alone." She smiled, though her clothes were dirty and her hair plastered to her face. "We do better together," she said simply. After storms and setbacks, life returned to its normal pace, but the couple began to understand that their partnership had been tested in ways they had not expected. Working together in times of crisis revealed not only their competence but the trust they had in each other. They had learned that they could face hardship and emerge stronger, and that understanding gave them confidence for whatever challenges lay ahead. As the weeks went on, the townsfolk continued to watch the ranch with curiosity. Some visitors came to see the animals, and others brought supplies. But in every interaction there was an undercurrent of judgment. The cowboy paid little attention, focusing instead on the work and on the partnership he had built. The woman, however, used these moments as lessons in patience and resilience. She spoke gently to the visitors, explaining her presence, demonstrating her abilities, and letting her work speak for itself. Over time, the whispers lessened, replaced with nods of respect from those who saw the results of their combined efforts. Despite the social scrutiny, the personal challenges they faced together brought them closer than ever. One day, while repairing the roof of the barn, the cowboy slipped slightly on a plank. She grabbed his arm instantly, steadying him before he could fall. They paused for a moment, looking at each other, and the cowboy realized that he trusted her completely, not only with the work but with his safety, with the ranch, and even with his life. Beyond physical work, they also navigated the emotional challenges of living together. There were moments of disagreement, deciding the best way to plant a new crop or how to allocate time between chores. But these were handled with patience and discussion. They had learned to listen, to compromise, and to respect each other's opinions. This ability to communicate and solve problems together strengthened their bond, making them more than just partners in work. They were companions, confidants, and eventually something much deeper. During quiet evenings after the work was done, they began to share stories of their pasts. The cowboy spoke of the long years he had spent riding the plains, of distant towns, and of the hardships he had faced. The woman shared stories of her upbringing, the lessons she had learned from her family, and the traditions of her people. Through these exchanges, they discovered not only each other's strengths, but also the vulnerabilities that made them human. They began to understand one another on a deeper level, realizing that trust was not just built through work, but through sharing one's true self. One particularly cold evening, as they tended to the livestock together, the wind whipping across the fields, the cowboy noticed how she had adapted to life on the ranch. She had brought knowledge and skills from her past that complemented his own, and together they were stronger than they had ever been alone. The cold wind and the challenges of the weather seemed easier to face when they worked side by side, and he began to feel a sense of gratitude that went beyond simple appreciation. He realized he had found a partner who would stand with him through storms, both literal and metaphorical. As spring approached, the ranch began to thrive. The crops grew strong, the animals were healthy, and the house felt alive with warmth and activity. Neighbors who had once questioned the woman's presence began to nod in acknowledgement, seeing that her work and partnership were genuine. Slowly, the couple became respected members of the community, not because they conformed to expectations, but because they demonstrated competence, integrity, and commitment. Through every challenge, storms, judgment, and the daily labor of ranch life, the cowboy and the woman learned that resilience was built not only through individual strength, but through shared effort. Their relationship had grown into a partnership rooted in trust, respect, and understanding. The challenges they faced had shaped them, tested them, and ultimately strengthened the bond that was forming between them. By the end of Part 4, it was clear that the ranch was no longer just a place of work or survival. It had become a home, a space where two people relied on one another, shared life's burdens and joys, and built something greater than either could have achieved alone. They had faced trials together, and those trials had revealed their true character and deepened their connection. The cowboy who had once sought only a helper realized that he had found far more, a companion who shared not just the work of the ranch, but the responsibilities, challenges, and joys of life itself. And the woman who had come to help found herself not only contributing to the ranch but shaping the life and heart of the man she had chosen to join. With the passing seasons, the ranch had transformed. What had once been a quiet, solitary place now buzzed with life, energy, and the rhythm of shared work. The cowboy and the woman had built more than fences and barns. They had built a partnership rooted in trust, respect, and deep understanding. Their days were full of chores, laughter, and quiet conversations, and their nights were spent in the comfort of shared stories and the peaceful presence of each other. Spring had given way to summer, and the fields were lush with green crops. The animals grazed calmly, and the house was filled with warmth from the sun and the smells of meals prepared with care. For the cowboy, life felt fuller than it ever had. The loneliness that had once weighed heavily on him was gone. He realized that he had been searching for help, but in truth he had found someone who completed his life in ways he had never imagined. The woman moved through the ranch as naturally as the wind through the trees. She tended the animals, cared for the house, and worked the fields with the same skill and confidence she had shown since the day she arrived. But her presence also brought joy, laughter, and light into spaces that had once felt empty. She had become more than a partner in labor. She was a companion, a friend, and a steady force that grounded him. One afternoon, after completing the morning chores, the cowboy and the woman walked through the orchard they had restored together. The trees were full and healthy, their branches heavy with ripening fruit. He watched her reach for a branch, gently brushing aside leaves to gather the best apples. She moved with grace, each motion purposeful and confident, yet kind and careful. He marveled at how much she had changed the ranch, not just through her work, but through her presence and perspective. "You've done wonders here," he said quietly, watching her. She looked up, a soft smile on her face. "We've done it together," she replied. "The land teaches those who listen, and I have learned much from you as well." He nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He had taught her the routines of the ranch, yes, but she had taught him to see things in new ways, to notice the subtle signs in the animals, the patterns in the crops, and the quiet beauty in everyday moments. Together, they had learned not only to survive, but to thrive. As summer deepened, the couple began to think beyond the immediate work of the ranch. They discussed planting new crops, improving the irrigation system, and adding more animals to their herd. Each decision was made together, with careful thought and mutual respect. The cowboy realized that he had never before considered sharing responsibility so fully, and he found satisfaction in the way their ideas complemented one another. She brought insight and creativity, while he contributed experience and knowledge. Together, they created a balance that strengthened both the ranch and their bond. The townsfolk had gradually come to respect the couple. Those who had once whispered or questioned now nodded in acknowledgement, admiring the work that had been accomplished and the way the ranch ran smoothly. It was clear to everyone who visited that the woman was more than a helper. She was an essential part of the ranch's life and success. The cowboy, once concerned with what others might think, had learned to focus instead on the results of their efforts, and in doing so, earned the quiet admiration of the community. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of orange and purple, the cowboy and the woman sat on the porch, looking out over the fields. The air was warm, filled with the smells of freshly cut hay and the faint aroma of evening flowers. They had spent the day tending to the animals, repairing fences, and preparing for the upcoming harvest. Yet, in that quiet moment, they allowed themselves to pause and simply enjoy the view. "I never thought life could feel like this," the cowboy said, his voice low and thoughtful. "So full, so alive." The woman nodded, her gaze on the horizon. "It is the work we do together," she said, "and the care we give not just to the land, but to each other. Life is richer when shared." Her words resonated with him. He realized that he had spent years riding alone, chasing work and survival without understanding the deeper meaning of companionship. Now he understood that life's true richness came from sharing it with someone who cared, someone who walked beside him in both labor and quiet moments. As the weeks passed, the couple continued to strengthen their connection. They celebrated small victories, like a successful harvest or a healthy new calf, and supported one another through minor setbacks, like a broken tool or a sudden summer storm. Each challenge reinforced their trust and reliance on one another, building a foundation that was unshakable. The woman's confidence and wisdom became invaluable in planning for the future. She suggested new crops that could thrive in the changing seasons, helped the cowboy strategize animal care, and taught him ways to conserve water and manage the land more effectively. He admired her foresight and intelligence, and he felt proud of the life they were building together. On a quiet evening, after tending to the last of the animals, they sat near the barn and watched the stars emerge in the dark sky. The air was still, and the sounds of the ranch, gentle rustling leaves, distant calls of animals, the soft hum of insects, filled the night. "You've changed this place," the cowboy said softly, glancing at her. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "We've changed it together," she said. "And in doing so, we've changed ourselves as well." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that the ranch was no longer just land he owned, but a home he shared. Their lives had intertwined so completely that it was impossible to separate the work from the companionship, or the land from the love and respect they had cultivated. As the harvest approached, the couple worked tirelessly to ensure the crops were gathered and stored properly. Their teamwork was seamless, each anticipating the other's needs and moving in harmony. The cowboy marveled at how much stronger and more capable they had become as a team. Where he once struggled to manage alone, they now flourished side by side. Neighbors occasionally came to help, impressed by the success of the ranch. They marveled at the teamwork and mutual respect between the cowboy and the woman. Those who had once doubted the arrangement now expressed admiration, recognizing the strength and dedication that had built not only a productive ranch, but a life full of meaning. Through it all, the cowboy reflected on how much his life had changed since the day she arrived. He had sought a helper, expecting someone to ease his burdens. Instead, he had found a companion, a partner, and a source of joy and inspiration. He realized that true companionship was not about convenience, but about mutual support, respect, and shared purpose. The woman, too, had grown through their shared life. She had arrived with skills and confidence, but the ranch had given her a home and a place to apply her talents fully. She had become integral to the operation of the ranch, but more importantly, she had become a central part of the cowboy's life, shaping his days, his thoughts, and even his heart. By the end of summer, the ranch was thriving more than ever. The fields were green and full, the animals healthy, and the house warm and inviting. The cowboy and the woman had created not just a home, but a life together. Their partnership had been tested by work, weather, and social scrutiny, and they had emerged stronger, more confident, and deeply connected. One evening, after the last chore was completed, they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in deep shades of gold and purple, and the air was filled with the quiet hum of life settling into night. The cowboy turned to her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and awe. "I never expected this," he said. "I thought I just needed help, but you've given me so much more. A life full of purpose, laughter, and companionship. I can't imagine it any other way."
She smiled, reaching for his hand.
"And I never expected to find a place like this or someone I could trust so completely. Together, we've built more than a ranch. We've built a life." As the stars began to appear one by one in the night sky, they sat quietly, feeling the peace that comes from knowing they had found a true partner in each other. The ranch, once quiet and solitary, was now alive with the fruits of their shared labor, trust, and care. Their lives had changed completely from the day she had arrived, and they knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together, side by side. The cowboy had sought a helper, but in finding her he had discovered love, companionship, and a shared purpose that would carry them through the years. The woman, who had come with a simple intention, had found a home, respect, and a life full of meaning. Together, they had transformed the ranch and themselves, proving that partnership, trust, and shared effort could create a life richer than either could have imagined alone. And so, as the night deepened over the quiet, thriving ranch, they sat together, ready for whatever the next day might bring, knowing that their lives, once separate, had now become one.